paid for my ex-husband's lawyer to sue me. Worth every penny. The email notification chimed on my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew it was Derek before I even looked. He only sent his most infuriating messages late at night, when he knew I'd be checking my work emails one last time before bed. Sarah, just wanted to let you know I decided to represent myself in court next month. Can't afford a lawyer on my barista salary, lol. Hope you're not planning to take the shirt off my back over this. I literally have nothing left to give you. Sleep tight. D***. I stared at the screen for a full minute, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. 3 years of marriage to Derek Mitchell had taught me to recognize his particular brand of smugness, even through a text message. The casual cruelty wrapped in false concern. The performative poverty. The implied threat that I was being unreasonable for expecting my fair share of our marital assets. What Derek didn't know was that I'd spent the last 6 weeks having him followed by a private investigator. What Derek didn't know was that while he was crying poor and living in a studio apartment in Riverside, claiming he made $12.50 an hour at some artisanal coffee shop, I had photos of him driving a Tesla registered under his brother's name. What Derek didn't know was that Marcus Chen, my PI, had traced a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and real estate holdings that added up to approximately $3.2 million in assets that had mysteriously vanished from our joint accounts in the months leading up to our separation. And what Derek definitely didn't know was that his pathetic attempt to represent himself had just handed me the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I set my phone down and walked to my kitchen, pouring myself a glass of wine with hands that trembled slightly from adrenaline rather than nerves. Through my apartment window, downtown Sacramento glittered in the distance, and I could almost feel the gears of justice preparing to turn in my favor. See, Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. He assumed I was the same naive woman he'd married 5 years ago, the one who'd believed his stories, trusted his explanations, and never questioned why our financial discussions always ended with me feeling confused and somehow guilty. He thought I was still that person who would accept defeat gracefully and walk away with whatever scraps he decided to throw me. But Derek had unknowingly married a woman who would become one of the most tenacious family law attorneys in Northern California. 3 years of his gaslighting had forged me into something harder and infinitely more dangerous than the soft-hearted public defender I'd been when we met. Tomorrow morning, I was going to make a phone call that would cost me every penny of my savings and then some. I was going to hire Catherine Walsh, the most ruthlessly thorough divorce attorney in the state, known for her ability to uncover hidden assets that other lawyers missed. Her retainer alone was $50,000, and her hourly rate could fund a small country. But here's the beautiful part, I wasn't hiring Catherine to represent me. I was hiring her to represent Derek. And thanks to the ethical rules governing attorney conduct, once Catherine Walsh was his lawyer, she would be legally obligated to ensure that all marital assets were properly disclosed to the court, regardless of who was paying her fees. Derek wanted to play games? Fine. But he'd forgotten that I'd learned the rules better than he ever had. The next morning, I sat in my car outside Walsh and Associates for 20 minutes before walking in, second-guessing myself with every passing minute. $50,000. That was more than most people made in a year, and I was about to hand it over to represent the man who'd spent 3 years systematically destroying my sense of reality. Catherine Walsh's office occupied the top 2 floors of a gleaming building on Capitol Mall. Even her receptionist looked like she cost more per hour than Derek claimed to make in a month. When Catherine finally called me back, I nearly lost my nerve. She was exactly what I'd expected, sharp silver hair, designer suit that probably cost more than my car payment, and eyes that could dissect a lie from 50 paces. Everything about her screamed competence and ruthless efficiency. Ms. Henderson, she said, settling behind her mahogany desk. Your call yesterday was unusual. You want to hire me to represent your ex-husband in your own divorce proceedings? That's correct. And you understand that if I take him on as a client, I would be ethically bound to zealously advocate for his interests, not yours? I nodded. I'm counting on it. Catherine leaned back, studying me with the intensity of a hawk sizing up prey. In 32 years of practice, I've never had a request quite like this. Walk me through your reasoning. I pulled out Marcus Chen's file, 3 inches thick with photographs, financial records, and documentation that had cost me another $15,000 to compile. Derek is hiding approximately $3.2 million in assets through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. He's planning to represent himself because he thinks he can control the narrative and limit discovery. Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly as she flipped through the evidence. This is comprehensive. Derek's mistake is assuming that self-representation means he gets to choose what evidence comes to light. But if he had proper legal counsel, your legal counsel, you'd be obligated to ensure full financial disclosure during discovery. Even if he instructed me not to? Especially then. You'd have to withdraw from representation rather than participate in perjury or fraud. And withdrawal on the eve of trial would trigger an automatic investigation into why his counsel abandoned him. Catherine was quiet for several minutes, studying Marcus's photographs of Derek's Tesla, his weekend trips to his undisclosed vacation property in Tahoe, his regular dinners at restaurants that cost more than his claimed weekly salary. Your PI is thorough, she finally said. But you realize this is an enormous gamble. If Derek becomes suspicious about where I came from, if he asks the wrong questions. He won't. I leaned forward. Derek's fatal flaw is his ego. He'll assume some legal aid organization took pity on him, or that you're looking for pro bono publicity. The idea that I would pay for his representation is so counterintuitive that it would never occur to him. And if this backfires? If somehow he manages to convince me that these assets don't exist? I thought about Derek's email from the night before. The casual cruelty. The years of being told I was imagining things, being too sensitive, asking for too much. Then I'll be broke, but at least I'll know I fought back with everything I had. Catherine closed the file and named her price. $50,000 for the retainer, $400 per hour after that, plus costs. Potentially another $30,000 to $40,000 before we were done. I wrote the check with a steady hand, watching 3 years of savings disappear with my signature. There's just one more thing, Catherine said as I stood to leave. Derek can't know you've hired me. Ever. If this comes out, it won't just ruin the case, it could end both our careers. I shook her hand. Then we better make sure it works. Walking back to my car, I felt simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. $87,000. That's what I'd now committed to this insane plan, 50 for Catherine's retainer, 15 for Marcus's investigation, and another 22,000 I'd calculated for her likely hourly fees based on similar cases I'd researched. My entire savings account, my emergency fund, and a chunk of my retirement that I'd have to liquidate. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Jennifer, * coffee later? Need sister advice about mom's birthday party. *. I stared at the message, realizing I couldn't tell anyone what I'd just done. Not Jennifer, not my best friend Lisa, not even my law school roommate who'd held my hair back while I cried over Derek's betrayals. This secret would have to live inside me alone until it either vindicated everything or destroyed me completely. The first test came sooner than expected. That afternoon, I was reviewing a client file when my office phone rang. Sarah Henderson speaking. Sarah, it's Catherine Walsh. We have a problem. My blood went cold. What kind of problem? I just got off the phone with your ex-husband. Apparently, Derek Mitchell is more paranoid than we anticipated. He's suspicious about my offer to represent him pro bono. I gripped the phone tighter. What exactly did he say? He asked why someone with my reputation would take on a case like his for free. I told him our firm occasionally takes on pro bono work for publicity purposes, but he's insisting on meeting with me tomorrow morning before he'll agree to representation. This was not part of the plan. Derek was supposed to be too arrogant to question good fortune when it landed in his lap. Can you handle it? I've been practicing law since before you were born, Ms. Henderson. I can handle one suspicious ex-husband. But you need to understand, if he starts digging into how I found him, if he asks the right questions. He won't, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Derek's ego is his weakness. Just appeal to his sense of being special, deserving of high-end representation. There's something else. In our preliminary conversation, he mentioned that he's been getting some unexpected help with his finances lately. He didn't elaborate, but it suggests there might be more money moving around than your PI documented. My stomach dropped. More hidden assets meant Derek was even more fraudulent than I discovered, but it also meant he had resources I hadn't accounted for. Resources that might make him more cautious, more paranoid. How much more are we potentially talking about? Impossible to say without discovery. But Sarah, if Derek has been receiving significant financial assistance from outside sources, family money, business partnerships, whatever, this case just became exponentially more complicated. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the Sacramento skyline, second-guessing every decision that had led me here. What if Derek's suspicions led him to investigate Catherine's client list? What if he discovered the payment had come from my account? What if there were assets hidden so deeply that even Catherine couldn't find them? My computer chimed with an email notification. Derek again. Sarah, funny thing happened today. Some big-shot lawyer called offering to represent me for free. Says she specializes in high-asset divorces. Weird coincidence, right? Almost like someone thinks I have more money than I've been saying. LOL. Anyway, meeting with her tomorrow. Should be interesting. Sweet dreams. *. I read the message 3 times, analyzing every word for hidden meaning. The casual tone didn't fool me, Derek was fishing. He suspected something, but he didn't know what. My hands were shaking as I typed back, * good luck with the lawyer. Hope it works out. *. Short, neutral, giving him nothing to analyze. But as I hit send, I realized Derek's paranoia might actually work in my favor. His suspicion that someone thought he had hidden money was already half an admission that hidden money existed. Tomorrow would determine whether my gamble paid off or whether I just funded my own destruction. That evening, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I tried reviewing case files, ordering takeout, even mindlessly scrolling through Netflix, but my thoughts kept circling back to Derek's email and Catherine's warning about unexpected help with his finances. By 9 p.m., I gave up pretending to be productive and called Marcus Chin. Sarah? Kind of late for a check-in call. Marcus, I need you to dig deeper into Derek's recent financial activity. Look for any new sources of income, family transfers, business partnerships, anything that might explain where he's getting money beyond what we've already documented. A pause. That's going to require surveillance on his family members, possibly his business associates. We're talking another 10 to 15 grand minimum, and that's if I find something quickly. 10,000 more. At this rate, I'd be eating ramen for the next 2 years. Do it. But Marcus, I need preliminary results by tomorrow afternoon. Before 5 p.m. Sarah, what's got you spooked? Yesterday you were confident about this plan. I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the lights of downtown. Derek's being more careful than I anticipated. If there's something we missed, something that makes him feel secure enough to question Catherine's motives, I need to know what it is. I'll see what I can do. After hanging up, I poured myself another glass of wine and tried to think through every possible scenario. What if Derek had wealthy relatives I didn't know about? What if his brother wasn't just letting Derek use his name on car registrations, but actually funding Derek's entire charade? What if there was family money that predated our marriage, making Derek genuinely wealthy rather than just a skilled thief? My phone rang at 11:23 p.m. Catherine Walsh. I hope I'm not calling too late, but I wanted to update you before my meeting with Derek tomorrow. What did you find? I had my investigator do some preliminary research on Mr. Mitchell this evening. Sarah, your ex-husband has been busier than either of us realized. In the past 6 weeks, he's incorporated 2 new LLCs in Nevada, opened business banking accounts in 3 different states, and purchased a commercial property in Folsom under one of his shell company names. The wine glass nearly slipped from my hand. How much are we talking about? The Folsom property alone was $800,000. Cash purchase. And that's just what we found in 4 hours of digging. $800,000. In cash. While claiming he made minimum wage at a coffee shop. Catherine, this is good news, right? More hidden assets means a bigger settlement when you expose everything during discovery. It would be, except for one problem. This level of financial activity suggests Derek isn't just hiding marital assets, he's actively generating new income from sources we haven't identified. If he's got ongoing business operations that sophisticated, he's going to have accountants, financial advisors, possibly other attorneys involved. People who might ask questions about where I came from. My stomach nodded. What are you saying? I'm saying your ex-husband isn't just a lying spouse trying to hide his savings account. He's running what appears to be a legitimate business empire while pretending to be broke. That makes him exponentially more dangerous. I set down my wine glass and started pacing. But he still has to disclose everything to you as his attorney, regardless of how complex his finances are. Yes, but Sarah, think about this practically. If Derek has been successfully hiding this much money from federal tax authorities, from business partners, from whoever else might be involved in these ventures, what makes you think he can't hide it from me? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. I'd been so focused on Derek's arrogance and his tendency to underestimate me that I hadn't fully considered the possibility that he might actually be smarter than I'd given him credit for. Are you saying we should call this off? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. I'm saying we need to be prepared for the possibility that your ex-husband is a more sophisticated adversary than either of us anticipated. Tomorrow's meeting will tell us a lot about what we're really dealing with. After she hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment, staring out at the city lights and wondering if I'd just made the most expensive mistake of my life. $97,000 and counting, betting everything on the assumption that Derek's ego would be his downfall. But what if Derek's ego was just a mask for something much more calculated? The meeting between Catherine and Derek was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 9:45, I was parked across the street from Walsh & Associates, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like some kind of deranged private investigator. I couldn't help myself. I needed to see Derek's face when he walked into that building, needed some clue about his state of mind. He arrived 12 minutes late, because of course he did. Derek had always been late to everything during our marriage, claiming it gave him a psychological advantage in negotiations. Watching him stride up to the building's entrance in his carefully curated broke barista costume, worn jeans, faded t-shirt, canvas sneakers that probably cost more than he claimed to make in a week, I felt that familiar surge of rage at his calculated performance. But something was different about his body language. The Derek I'd been married to would have been nervous walking into a high-end law firm, intimidated by the obvious wealth and power. This Derek looked comfortable. Like he belonged there. My phone rang at 11:47 a.m. Catherine. We have a bigger problem than I thought. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What happened? Derek Mitchell is not the bumbling amateur we expected. Sarah, he came in here with a prepared list of questions about my firm's pro bono policies, my case history with asset recovery, and my professional relationship with opposing counsel in Sacramento Family Court. He's done his homework. My mouth went dry. Did he ask about you specifically? About how you found him? Not directly, but he's fishing. And Sarah, there's something else. He mentioned that he's been consulting with some business advisors about his financial situation. When I pressed for details, he said they'd advised him to be very careful about any legal representation that seemed too good to be true. Business advisors. Derek had never mentioned having business advisors during our marriage. He'd barely been able to balance our checking account without my help, or so I thought. Did he agree to the representation? He's thinking it over. Wants to sleep on it and get back to me tomorrow. But Sarah, he also asked me something that made my blood run cold. He wanted to know if I'd ever represented a spouse against their ex-partner in a divorce case. I felt the world tilt slightly. What did you tell him? I said no, which is technically true. I've never been hired by one spouse to represent the other. But the fact that he asked that specific question suggests he's at least considered the possibility that someone else might be behind my offer. After hanging up, I sat in my car for another hour, watching lawyers and clients flow in and out of Catherine's building. $100,000. That's what I'd now committed to this plan, and Derek was proving more paranoid and sophisticated than I'd ever imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, * preliminary surveillance results. You need to see this. Can you meet at my office at 3 p.m.? *. Marcus Chen's office was located in a strip mall in Natomas, squeezed between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The unglamorous location was part of his appeal. Nobody expected top-tier investigative work from someone operating out of a former Radio Shack. Sarah, sit down. You're going to want to be sitting for this. He spread a series of photographs across his desk. Derek leaving an upscale office building in Roseville. Derek shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside a BMW dealership. Derek having lunch at Morton Steakhouse with 3 people I didn't recognize. That's from yesterday afternoon, after Derek's meeting with your lawyer, Marcus said. The man in the suit is Richard Morrison, a partner at Morrison & Associates. They specialize in offshore asset protection and tax avoidance strategies for high-net-worth individuals. My hands were shaking as I picked up the restaurant photo. Who are the other people? Still working on that, but the woman in the red jacket drove away in a Maserati registered to something called Pacific Holdings Group. The other two left in separate vehicles, both luxury cars, both registered to business entities rather than individuals. I stared at the images, trying to reconcile them with the Derek I'd known. The Derek who used to ask me to handle our tax returns because numbers made his brain hurt. The Derek who claimed he'd never understood our investment accounts. Marcus, how long has this been going on? This level of sophistication? That's the million-dollar question. Based on what I found so far, Derek's been building this network for at least 2 years. Maybe longer. The scary part is how compartmentalized everything is: shell companies that own other shell companies, properties held in trust, business partnerships structured to minimize paper trails. 2 years. That meant Derek had been planning his exit from our marriage and constructing his financial fortress while still sleeping next to me every night, still kissing me goodbye every morning, still telling me he loved me. There's more, Marcus continued. I tracked down the coffee shop where Derek claims to work. Grind Coffee on J Street. Sarah, they've never heard of Derek Mitchell. He's never worked there. The room seemed to spin slightly. What? His entire cover story is fabricated. The studio apartment in Riverside? He rents it month to month, but neighbors say they've never seen him there overnight. It's just a prop. I thought about all the times Derek had complained about his exhausting shifts, his difficult customers, his barely livable wages. All lies. Every single word. So where is he actually living? Marcus pulled out another photograph. A sprawling house in Granite Bay, complete with a 3-car garage and a swimming pool. Purchased 18 months ago through one of his LLCs, property records show it's valued at $1.8 million. As I stared at the photo, my phone rang. Derek. Sarah. How's my favorite ex-wife? I forced my voice to stay steady. What do you want, Derek? Just wanted to let you know I decided to accept that lawyer's generous offer. Catherine Walsh seems very thorough. I'm sure she'll do an excellent job making sure everything gets properly disclosed to the court. The way he said everything made my skin crawl. Like he knew exactly what game we were playing. I'm glad you found representation. Oh, I'm sure you are. Sweet dreams, Sarah. The line went dead, and I realized Derek hadn't just outmaneuvered me. He'd been expecting me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Derek's casual confidence, his pointed comments about everything being disclosed, the way he'd emphasized Catherine's thoroughness, he wasn't just suspicious about my involvement. He knew. I sat in Marcus's cramped office, staring at the photographs of Derek's secret life, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd walked into. $100,000 spent on a plan that Derek had apparently seen coming from miles away. Marcus, I said slowly, if Derek knew I was behind Catherine's offer, why would he accept her representation? Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying the surveillance photos. Two possibilities. Either he's confident he can manipulate the situation to his advantage, or he wants you to think you've outmaneuvered him while he's actually playing a completely different game. My phone buzzed with an email from Catherine. The timestamp showed 3:47 p.m., less than 20 minutes after Derek's call. Sarah, Derek just called to formally accept representation. Something feels off about his eagerness. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow morning? We need to discuss strategy before our first official meeting. Catherine *. Strategy. As if I had any left. Derek had somehow turned my carefully orchestrated trap into his advantage, and I couldn't even figure out how he'd done it. There's something else you need to see, Marcus said, pulling out his laptop. I've been monitoring Derek's financial activity in real time since yesterday. Look at this. He showed me a series of bank transfers, all timestamped from the past 24 hours. Money moving between accounts I'd never seen before, in amounts that made my head spin. 50,000 here, 30,000 there, 120,000 transferred to something called Morrison Holdings International. He's moving money, I whispered. A lot of money. And Sarah, these transfers are all happening after his meeting with Catherine. It's like he's repositioning assets in preparation for something. I thought about Catherine's legal obligation to ensure full disclosure of Derek's finances. If he was moving money around now, before formal discovery began, was he trying to hide assets even from his own attorney? Or was this part of some larger strategy one couldn't see? Can we trace where the money's going? Some of it. The Morrison Holdings account appears to be connected to an investment firm in the Cayman Islands. Very high-end, very discreet. Minimum investment requirements in the millions. Millions. While I'd been scraping together $100,000 to fund this scheme, Derek had been casually moving millions through offshore accounts like it was pocket change. My phone rang again. Jennifer, my sister. Sarah, are you okay? You sound weird in your texts lately. I hadn't even realized my texts had been weird. The stress of the past few days was apparently bleeding into every aspect of my life. I'm fine, just busy with work. Is this about Derek? I know the divorce stuff has been dragging on forever, but... Jen, I can't talk about it right now. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on? I wanted desperately to tell her everything. The investigation, the hidden millions, Catherine Walsh, the mounting evidence that my ex-husband was some kind of financial mastermind who'd been playing me for years. But the secret felt too dangerous to share, too explosive to trust to anyone else. I promise I'll explain everything soon. I just need a few more days. After hanging up, I realized I'd been holding my breath. The isolation was almost worse than the uncertainty. I'd committed my entire financial future to a plan that was unraveling in real time, and I couldn't tell a soul about it. Marcus, I need you to keep monitoring Derek's accounts. Every transaction, every movement of money. If he's preparing for something, I need to know what it is before tomorrow morning. That's going to cost. I don't care what it costs. The lie came easily, even though my savings account was already decimated. At this point, what was another few $1,000s on top of financial ruin? As I drove home through Sacramento's evening traffic, Derek's words echoed in my head, sweet dreams, Sarah. He'd been saying that for months, always with that subtle note of mockery. But now I wondered if it had been a threat all along. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek's smug face and heard that casual confidence in his voice when he'd accepted Catherine's representation. By 4 a.m., I gave up pretending and made coffee, settling at my kitchen table with Marcus's surveillance photos spread out like tarot cards predicting my doom. The meeting with Catherine was scheduled for 8 a.m. At 6:30, my phone rang. Sarah, we have an emergency. Catherine's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I just received a call from Derek. He wants to move up our first official meeting to this morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Why the rush? He claims he's received some new financial documents that will simplify the disclosure process. Sarah, nobody talks like that unless they're either completely naive or completely calculating. And after yesterday's meeting, I don't think your ex-husband is naive. I gripped the phone tighter. What kind of documents? He wouldn't specify. But he mentioned wanting to get everything on the table early to avoid any complications during discovery. It's either the behavior of someone with nothing to hide, or someone who's about to reveal exactly what he wants revealed while burying everything else. An hour later, I was back in my car across from Walsh & Associates, watching Derek arrive with a leather briefcase I'd never seen before. He looked different again, more polished, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt that actually fit properly. The bumbling barista costume was gone, replaced by something closer to business casual. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, *urgent. Derek made 3 calls this morning. 1 to Morrison Holdings, 1 to a number registered in the Cayman Islands, and 1 to a local bank. The bank call lasted 23 minutes. 23 minutes. That wasn't a balance inquiry or a simple transaction. That was the kind of call where someone moves serious money or sets up complex financial instruments. At 10:15, my phone rang. Catherine, and she sounded shaken. Sarah, I need you to come to my office immediately. Use the service entrance on the building's north side. Take the freight elevator to the 15th floor. Don't let anyone see you. What happened? Just get here. Now. The freight elevator smelled like industrial cleaning supplies and decades of legal documents. When Catherine met me at the service entrance to her office suite, her usual composure was cracked around the edges. Derek just handed me documentation for $12 million in assets, she said without preamble. I nearly stumbled. 12 million? Real estate holdings, investment accounts, business partnerships, all properly documented, all apparently legitimate. Sarah, he didn't just disclose hidden assets. He buried us in an avalanche of financial complexity that's going to take months to unravel. She led me to her office, where Derek's briefcase contents were spread across her conference table. Bank statements, property deeds, corporate filings, investment portfolios, everything stamped and notarized and frighteningly official. Here's the problem, Catherine continued. This level of organization doesn't happen overnight. Derek has been preparing this disclosure package for months, maybe longer. Every document is pristine, every number cross-references perfectly, every asset is structured just legally enough to avoid fraud charges while making it nearly impossible to determine what's actually marital property. I picked up a property deed for something called Mitchell Family Trust Holdings. The address was in Napa Valley. The assessed value was $2.3 million. Catherine, this is good news, right? He's handed us evidence of massive asset concealment. Look at the dates, Sarah. I looked. The trust was established 4 months after our divorce proceedings began. The Napa property was purchased 6 weeks ago. The investment accounts showed initial deposits from just 3 weeks earlier. He's claiming these are all post-separation assets, Catherine said quietly. Investments made with money he earned after your marriage ended. Sarah, if he can prove these assets were generated independently after your legal separation, you have no claim to them. The room felt like it was tilting. But the money to buy these things had to come from somewhere. From our joint accounts, from assets he had during the marriage. Proving that connection is going to require forensic accounting that could take years and cost more than the assets are worth. Derek just buried us in legitimate paperwork while the actual marital assets have probably disappeared into structures so complex that we'll never untangle them. I sank into one of Catherine's leather chairs, finally understanding the scope of Derek's game. He hadn't just hidden money from me during our divorce. He'd spent months constructing an elaborate shell game where he could appear to cooperate fully while making it practically impossible for me to claim what was rightfully mine. There's something else, Catherine said. Derek specifically asked if I thought you'd be satisfied with this level of disclosure. He wanted to know if I thought it demonstrated his commitment to transparency. The mockery was unmistakable. Derek was using my own lawyer to taunt me, secure in the knowledge that Catherine couldn't reveal who was really paying her fees. My phone buzzed with another text from Derek. Asterisk, hope you're having a good morning. Justice is such a beautiful thing when everyone plays by the rules. XOXO D asterisk. I stared at the message, finally realizing that Derek hadn't just outmaneuvered me. He'd turned my own trap into his victory lap. I sat in Catherine's office staring at Derek's perfectly organized financial disclosure, my mind racing through possibilities I hadn't considered. $12 million in post-separation assets. The numbers were staggering, but something about the timing felt wrong. Catherine, you said Derek made these investments after our separation. But look at this. I pulled out one of the investment portfolio statements, pointing to a series of dividend payments. These dividends are dated from 8 months ago. You can't get dividend payments from stocks you haven't owned. Catherine leaned over, studying the document more carefully. You're right. This shows a payment history going back almost a year. She grabbed another file. And this property deed, the notary date is from last month, but the mortgage documentation references a loan origination from 14 months ago. My heart started beating faster. He made mistakes. More than mistakes. Sarah, I think Derek got so focused on creating the appearance of post-separation wealth that he forgot to scrub the historical data. These documents are internally inconsistent. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus. I need you to cross-reference every date on the documents Derek just disclosed with the financial activity you've been tracking. Look for any transactions that predate our legal separation. Give me 2 hours, Marcus said. While we waited, Catherine and I spread Derek's disclosure across her conference table, looking for more inconsistencies. The Morrison Holdings account showed a founding date of 6 weeks ago, but referenced ongoing business relationships in its corporate filings. The Cayman Islands investment firm had Derek listed as a legacy client while claiming he'd only opened his account in the past month. He's been sloppy, Catherine said, sounding energized for the first time since this morning. Derek assumed that the sheer volume of documentation would overwhelm us, but he didn't proofread for consistency. At 1:43 p.m., Marcus called back. Sarah, you're going to love this. That $2.3 million Napa property? The initial wire transfer for the down payment came from an account Derek opened in January, 3 months before you filed for divorce. The Morrison Holdings seed money traces back to liquidated assets from December, when you were still legally married. And here's the best part, Derek's Cayman Islands account received a $4.7 million transfer in February from something called Mitchell Development Corp., which I can trace directly back to your joint savings account from 2019. I felt a surge of vindication so strong it was almost physical. Can you document all of this? Already on it. I'll have a comprehensive timeline on your desk by 5 p.m., complete with bank routing numbers and transaction IDs. After hanging up, I turned to Catherine. We've got him. But Catherine looked troubled rather than excited. Sarah, there's something that's been bothering me about Derek's behavior today. He was too eager to hand over these documents. Too confident. What if he wanted us to find these inconsistencies? Why would he want that? Think about it. If Derek can prove that some of his assets are legitimately post-separation while others are disputed marital property, he creates a negotiation scenario. He can offer to settle for a portion of the questionable assets while keeping everything that's clearly his. Meanwhile, you'd be looking at years of litigation costs to fight for assets he's already moved offshore. My stomach sank. Even if we could prove Derek had hidden millions during our marriage, actually recovering that money could cost more than it was worth. And Derek knew I didn't have unlimited resources to fund a prolonged legal battle. He's trying to force a settlement, I realized. My phone rang. Derek, right on cue. Sarah, darling. I hope you've had a chance to review my financial disclosure. Pretty impressive what a guy can accomplish when he puts his mind to it, right? What do you want, Derek? Just wanted to let you know I'm feeling generous. Catherine and I had such a productive meeting today, and I'd hate for this whole thing to drag on and get expensive for everyone involved. I'm thinking we could wrap this up with a nice, clean settlement. Say, $200,000 and we call it even? 200,000. Out of 12 million in assets I could now prove he'd been hiding. Counteroffer, I said. Go to hell. Derek laughed. Oh, Sarah. Still so emotional. Well, the offer stands until Monday morning. After that, I'm afraid my legal costs are going to make me much less generous. The line went dead, and I realized Derek's endgame was becoming clear. He disclosed just enough to demonstrate cooperation while structuring everything to make full recovery practically impossible. The $200,000 settlement was designed to sound reasonable compared to the cost and uncertainty of prolonged litigation. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. He assumed I was the same person who'd married him, someone who could be worn down, intimidated into accepting less than she deserved. I looked at Catherine. How do you feel about going to war? Catherine's question hung in the air between us like a challenge. How do you feel about going to war? The answer should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, absolute clarity. Let's destroy him, I said. Catherine smiled, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I understood why Derek's business advisors might have warned him to be careful. Catherine Walsh hadn't built her reputation on settling cases. She'd built it on winning them. Good. Because I have an idea that's either brilliant or completely insane. She pulled out her laptop. Derek thinks he's controlling the narrative by flooding us with documentation. But what if we used his own thoroughness against him? What do you mean? Every document Derek provided has to be filed with various government agencies, the IRS, the SEC, state corporate registries. If even one of these filings contains false information, it's not just perjury in family court. It's federal fraud. I leaned forward. You're saying we report him? I'm saying we audit him. Every single asset, every transaction, every corporate filing. We turned Derek's financial empire into a federal investigation. Catherine's eyes gleamed with something that looked like anticipation. Sarah, Derek made $12 million appear legitimate through paperwork. But paperwork has to match reality, and reality is very hard to fake. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, * timeline complete. Also found something interesting about Morrison Holdings. Can you meet at 6 p.m? *. At Marcus's office, I spread out Derek's disclosure documents alongside the timeline Marcus had compiled. The contradictions were even more damning than we'd realized. Look at this, Marcus said, pointing to a series of highlighted entries. Derek claimed Morrison Holdings was established 6 weeks ago, but I found corporate tax filings going back 18 months. Not only was he running this company during your marriage, he was using it to funnel money out of your joint accounts. How much money? Conservative estimate? About $3.8 million over the past 2 years. Marcus pulled out another file. But here's the really interesting part. Morrison Holdings has been paying Derek a salary of $45,000 per month as a consulting fee, while he was crying poverty and claiming he made minimum wage. $45,000 per month. I calculated quickly, $540,000 per year in undisclosed income while Derek performed his broke barista act. The audacity was breathtaking. There's more, Marcus continued. Remember that coffee shop where Derek supposedly worked? Grind Coffee on J Street? I did some digging into their business records. Guess who owns the building? I had a sinking feeling I knew the answer. Morrison Holdings purchased the property 14 months ago. Derek doesn't work at that coffee shop, he owns it. The whole minimum wage story was theater, complete with a stage he bought himself. I stared at the property records, finally understanding the scope of Derek's deception. He hadn't just hidden assets during our divorce. He'd constructed an entire alternate reality, complete with fake employment and fabricated poverty, while secretly operating a multi-million-dollar business empire. My phone rang. Catherine. Sarah, I just heard from Derek. He wants to schedule another meeting tomorrow morning. Claims he has additional documentation that will simplify everything. She paused. He also asked if I thought you were coming around to the idea of a reasonable settlement. What did you tell him? I told him I'd present any settlement offer to you, but that my professional opinion was that you deserved full disclosure before making any decisions. Catherine's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Derek seemed very pleased to hear that I was advocating for complete transparency. After hanging up, I realized Derek was still playing the same game, using my own lawyer to gauge my reactions while feeling secure that she couldn't reveal the truth about our arrangement. But what Derek didn't know was that his performance was about to become evidence in a federal investigation. I looked at Marcus's timeline again, calculating the weight of Derek's lies. 18 months of hidden income. $3.8 million in diverted assets. A fake business identity designed to defraud the court. Derek wanted to play games with paperwork? Fine. But he'd forgotten that paper trails run both ways. I spent that night preparing for war. Spread across my dining room table were copies of every document Derek had provided, cross-referenced with Marcus's timeline and highlighted in 3 different colors, red for outright lies, yellow for suspicious timing, and green for information that could be independently verified. By 3 a.m., my apartment looked like a forensic accountant's fever dream. The green highlights were the most damning. Every legitimate piece of information Derek had provided could be traced back to assets or income that should have been disclosed during our original divorce proceedings. The Morrison Holdings consulting fees, the property purchases, even the coffee shop ownership, all of it generated from money that had once been ours. At 6:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Derek, * looking forward to wrapping this up today. Catherine seems very optimistic about reaching a fair resolution. Hope you slept well. D**. The casual tone didn't fool me anymore. Derek was fishing for information about my state of mind, still assuming his lawyer would give him insights into my thinking. What he didn't realize was that Catherine and I had spent the previous evening crafting a response designed specifically for his consumption. I arrived at Catherine's office at 8:30, using the main entrance this time. If Derek was watching, and given his level of paranoia, he probably was, I wanted him to see me walking confidently into his lawyer's building. Let him wonder what that meant. Derek's bringing his accountant today, Catherine informed me as I settled into her office. Someone named Patricia Hendricks from Morrison and Associates, the same firm where Derek had lunch with those unidentified business partners. That was new. Derek introducing outside professionals meant either he was getting nervous about our scrutiny, or he was preparing to reveal something significant. Neither option felt particularly reassuring. Have you run a background check on this Patricia Hendricks? Already done. 23 years in forensic accounting, specializes in complex asset structures for high net worth individuals. Sarah, Derek isn't just bringing backup, he's bringing someone who could potentially legitimize his entire financial narrative. At 9:15, I watched through Catherine's window as Derek arrived with a woman in her 50s wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They moved with the easy familiarity of people who'd worked together before, which contradicted Derek's story about recently acquiring business advisors. My phone rang at 10:33. Catherine. We have a problem. Patricia Hendricks just presented documentation suggesting that Derek's business activities over the past 2 years were funded entirely through legitimate loans and investment partnerships that predate your marriage. My stomach dropped. What kind of documentation? Loan agreements, partnership contracts, investment prospectuses, all dated from 2018 and 2019. Sarah, if these documents are legitimate, they could potentially explain the source of Derek's hidden wealth without implicating marital assets. But I remembered something from Marcus's investigation. Catherine asked to see the original signed copies, not photocopies. And pay attention to the notary stamps. Why? Just trust me. At 11:45, Catherine called back, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Sarah, you were right. The notary stamps on 3 of those loan documents are from a company that went out of business in 2017. The partnership agreements reference a business address that didn't exist until 2020. Patricia Hendricks just handed us evidence of document fraud. I felt that familiar surge of vindication, but this time it was tempered by something else, a growing understanding of exactly how sophisticated Derek's deception had become. He hadn't just hidden money. He'd attempted to reconstruct history itself, complete with backdated legal documents and fabricated business relationships. But his attention to detail had finally failed him. Catherine, I need you to do something that might sound crazy. At this point, I'm prepared for anything. I want you to ask Derek if he's comfortable submitting all of this documentation to a federal audit. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Sarah, that's not crazy. That's nuclear. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Sarah, that's not crazy. That's nuclear. Then let's launch the missile. At 12:17 p.m., Catherine called back, and I could practically hear Derek's panic through the phone. He went completely white when I mentioned a federal audit, Catherine reported. Started backtracking immediately, saying maybe some of the documentation needed to be refined before involving government agencies. Patricia Hendricks actually excused herself to make a phone call. What did you tell them? I said that as his attorney, I was obligated to ensure all filings were accurate before submitting them to the court. If there were any discrepancies that needed addressing, now was the time. Catherine paused. Derek asked for a 48-hour continuance to gather additional supporting materials. 48 hours. Derek was buying time, which meant he was either planning his next move or preparing to run. Given the millions he had hidden offshore, running was a very real possibility. My phone rang at 1:23 p.m. Marcus. Sarah, we have movement. Derek just made 4 calls, 2 to international numbers, 1 to what appears to be a travel agency, and 1 to a law firm in Nevada that specializes in bankruptcy and asset protection. My blood ran cold. He's planning to disappear. Gets worse. I just checked his known accounts. Over $2 million has been transferred out since yesterday, all going to offshore entities I can't trace. If Derek's preparing to vanish, he's taking the money with him. I sat in my car outside Catherine's building, watching normal people go about their normal lives while my world imploded in real time. Derek wasn't just going to escape with millions of stolen assets, he was going to leave me financially destroyed and legally humiliated. The $100,000 I'd spent on this scheme would be the cherry on top of his victory. But then I remembered something Derek had said weeks ago, something that had seemed like typical arrogance at the time. Asterisk, I literally have nothing left to give you. Asterisk. Not asterisk, I don't have anything. Asterisk, I have nothing left to give. Asterisk. As if he'd already given everything to someone else. I called Marcus back. I need you to investigate Derek's family finances. His brother, his parents, anyone who might be holding assets on his behalf. That could take days. We don't have days. Focus on his brother first. The one whose name was on that Tesla registration. At 3:47 p.m., Marcus called back with information that made my head spin. Sarah, Derek's brother Michael isn't just letting Derek use his name. Michael Mitchell has received over $800,000 in transfers from Morrison Holdings over the past 6 months. But here's the interesting part, Michael immediately transferred that money to a trust account benefiting Derek's parents in Florida. His parents are in on this? Gets better. Derek's parents used that money to purchase a $1.2 million house in Boca Raton 3 months ago. The deed lists Derek as the primary beneficiary in case anything happens to them. I felt the pieces clicking together. Derek hadn't just hidden assets from me, he'd distributed them among family members to create multiple layers of legal protection. Even if I won a judgment against Derek personally, pursuing assets held by his relatives would require separate lawsuits in multiple states. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek, asterisk Sarah, I've been thinking about our situation. Maybe we both got a little carried away. What would you say to $350,000 and we call it even? I'd hate for this to get any more complicated. D asterisk. 350,000. His panic was making him more generous, but it was still a fraction of what he'd stolen. And more importantly, it was evidence that Derek knew exactly how bad his situation had become. I texted back, asterisk counteroffer, full asset disclosure and $2.5 million, or I'll see you in federal court. Asterisk. His response came within minutes, asterisk federal court. Sarah, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. My lawyers say everything I've done is perfectly legal. Asterisk. Everything I've done is perfectly legal past tense. As if his criminal activities were finished rather than ongoing. My phone rang. Catherine, and she sounded breathless. Sarah, Patricia Hendricks just called me directly. She wants to set up a meeting without Derek present. Says she has information that could resolve this matter quickly and quietly. A forensic accountant wanting to meet secretly, without her client's knowledge. That could only mean one thing. She's going to flip on him. That's my read. Sarah, if Derek's own accountant is willing to testify against him, this case just became a lot more winnable. I gripped the phone tighter, finally allowing myself to feel something I hadn't experienced in months, hope. Derek thought he'd been playing chess while I played checkers. But he'd forgotten that I'd been learning the rules. Patricia Hendricks met me at a Starbucks in Midtown at 7 p.m., choosing a corner table far from the windows. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in days, her usual professional polish replaced by something closer to raw nerves. Miss Henderson, I need you to understand something before we begin, she said, gripping her coffee cup with white knuckles. I've been Derek's accountant for 8 months, not 2 years like he claimed. And everything I've seen in those 8 months suggests your ex-husband has been committing systematic financial fraud. My heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of fraud? Patricia pulled out a manila folder, glancing around nervously before opening it. Derek hired my firm to create what he called historical business documentation for his divorce proceedings. He claimed he needed to reconstruct records that had been lost in a computer crash. But you weren't reconstructing anything. We were fabricating it. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Loan agreements backdated to 2018, partnership contracts with companies that didn't exist, investment records for accounts that were opened last month but showed years of transaction history. I stared at the documents she was showing me, pristine financial records that I now knew were completely manufactured. Why are you telling me this? Because Derek just asked me to create documentation showing that he's broke again. Wants me to make it look like all his assets were legitimate business investments that failed due to market conditions. Patricia's hands were shaking now. Miss Henderson, I could lose my license for what I've already done. I won't manufacture evidence to help him defraud you out of a settlement too. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek, asterisk Sarah, hope you're having a peaceful evening. Tomorrow's going to be such an important day for both of us. Sleep tight. D asterisk. I showed Patricia the message. Her face went pale. He knows I'm talking to you. How could he possibly know that? Patricia's eyes widened with something approaching panic. Derek has been monitoring things more closely than I realized. My phone calls, my meetings, even my emails. He claimed it was standard security for high-value clients, but... She grabbed my arm. Miss Henderson, you need to be very careful. Derek isn't just hiding money. I think he's been planning something much bigger. What do you mean? She pulled out her phone, scrolling through text messages. Look at these instructions he sent me yesterday. Prepare liquidation schedules for all Morrison Holdings assets. Need everything converted to untraceable instruments by Friday. Also need documentation showing Patricia Hendricks was terminated due to performance issues. The implications hit me like ice water. Derek wasn't just planning to disappear with the money, he was planning to destroy anyone who could testify against him. Patricia's performance issues would discredit her as a witness, while the liquidated assets would vanish into offshore accounts beyond the reach of any court. Patricia, we need to move fast. How much documentation do you have proving Derek's fraud? Everything. I kept copies of all the original files before we altered them, plus email chains showing Derek's specific instructions for the fabrications. She hesitated. But Miss Henderson, if Derek realizes what I'm giving you, I'm not just talking about losing my license. The people Derek's been working with, the offshore account managers, the shell company operators, these aren't just accountants and lawyers. Some of them have connections that make me very nervous. My phone rang. Catherine. Sarah, we have an emergency. Derek just filed a motion claiming that his accountant has been embezzling from his business accounts and that all previous financial disclosures may be compromised due to her fraudulent record keeping. I looked at Patricia, who had gone completely white. He's already making his move. There's more. Derek's requesting an emergency hearing tomorrow morning, claiming he needs protection from what he's calling malicious prosecution by parties unknown. Catherine's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Sarah, Derek is trying to paint himself as a victim while simultaneously discrediting his own accountant's testimony. Patricia was frantically typing on her phone. I'm uploading everything to a secure cloud server right now. If something happens to me, the files will automatically be sent to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. As I watched Patricia's fingers fly across her phone screen, uploading years of evidence that could destroy Derek's carefully constructed lies, I realized we were no longer just fighting a divorce case. We were racing against time to stop a man who had proven he would sacrifice anyone to protect his secrets. My phone rang at 11:42 p.m. Unknown number. Sarah Henderson? The voice was unfamiliar, professional but tense. Who is this? Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I need to speak with you immediately regarding Derek Mitchell and Patricia Hendricks. My blood turned to ice. Is Patricia okay? Ms. Hendricks is in protective custody. Her cloud upload triggered several federal alerts about ongoing financial crimes investigations. Ms. Henderson, how much do you know about your ex-husband's international business activities? I sank onto my couch, the weight of Agent Torres' question settling over me like a physical presence. I know he's been hiding millions in offshore accounts and fabricating business records. That's just the beginning. Derek Mitchell is a person of interest in a multi-state investigation involving money laundering, tax evasion, and wire fraud. The Morrison Holdings network you've been investigating? It's connected to at least 6 other individuals we've been tracking for the past 18 months. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Through my windows, downtown Sacramento's lights blurred as my hands started shaking. Agent Torres, am I in danger? We don't believe so, but Derek Mitchell has been making some unusual financial moves in the past 48 hours. Large transfers to accounts in non-extradition countries, purchasing assets that could facilitate rapid international travel. Ms. Henderson, we need to meet tonight. I looked at my clock. Nearly midnight. Where? There's a 24-hour diner on Arden Way called Mel's. I'll be in the back booth wearing a blue jacket. Come alone, and Miss Henderson? Don't use your car. Take a rideshare and have them drop you 2 blocks away. The paranoia felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than my actual life. But as I waited for my Uber, I realized Derek's casual cruelty during our marriage had been masking something far more calculating than I'd ever imagined. Agent Torres was exactly where she'd said she'd be, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of focused intensity that made me instantly nervous. She slid a manila folder across the table as I sat down. Patricia Hendricks gave us everything, she said without preamble. Financial records, email chains, documentation of systematic fraud going back 3 years. Ms. Henderson, your ex-husband hasn't just been hiding assets from your divorce. He's been running what we believe is a sophisticated money laundering operation. I opened the folder, seeing bank records with transaction amounts that made my head spin. 12 million, 15 million, 23 million, numbers so large they didn't seem real. The Morrison Holdings network is just one piece, Agent Torres continued. Derek's been moving money for other individuals, taking a percentage as commission while helping them hide assets from various government agencies. Tax evaders, people avoiding court judgments, individuals trying to move money out of the country without triggering federal reporting requirements. How long has this been going on? We think Derek started small about 4 years ago, just hiding his own assets. But once he realized how effective his methods were, he began offering services to others. Ms. Henderson, we estimate he's processed over $60 million in questionable transactions. 60 million. While I'd been scraping together $100,000 to fund my revenge scheme, Derek had been operating a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. There's something else you need to know, Agent Torres said, lowering her voice. We've been monitoring Derek's communications. He knows about your arrangement with Catherine Walsh. The diner's fluorescent lighting suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. How is that possible? Derek hired a private security firm 6 weeks ago, the same week you started having him followed. Professional-grade surveillance, phone monitoring, financial tracking. Ms. Henderson, Derek has been watching you just as closely as you've been watching him. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek, Sarah, can't sleep. Keep thinking about tomorrow's hearing. Justice is so beautiful when everyone tells the truth, don't you think? Sweet dreams. D*. Agent Torres read the message over my shoulder. That's not a casual text. Derek's telling you he knows about Patricia's cooperation and your federal involvement. He's also warning you that he's prepared for tomorrow's hearing. What happens now? Now we arrest Derek Mitchell before he can liquidate the remaining assets and disappear. Agent Torres closed the folder. Ms. Henderson, that emergency hearing Derek requested for tomorrow morning? It's a trap. He's planning to use it as cover for his final financial transfers while making you look like a vindictive ex-wife who's harassing him with frivolous federal investigations. I thought about Catherine's legal obligation to advocate for Derek's interests, even knowing what we now knew about his crimes. Agent Torres, my lawyer doesn't know about this federal investigation. She's still representing Derek, still bound by attorney-client privilege. Which is exactly what Derek is counting on. He assumes Catherine Walsh will protect his interests tomorrow morning while he executes his escape plan. Agent Torres stood up. But Derek made one crucial mistake. He assumed the FBI would need weeks to build a case against him. How long do you actually need? Agent Torres smiled grimly. We've been building this case for 18 months. Patricia Hendricks just gave us the final pieces. Derek Mitchell will be under arrest before tomorrow's hearing begins. As I sat in that fluorescent-lit diner at 1:30 in the morning, I realized Derek's greatest miscalculation hadn't been underestimating me. It had been assuming he was the only one playing a long game. At 6:47 a.m., my phone rang with a call that would change everything. Sarah, this is Agent Torres. We have a problem. Derek didn't come home last night. I bolted upright in bed, instantly awake. What do you mean he didn't come home? Our surveillance team lost him at 11:23 p.m. He left his Granite Bay house carrying 2 suitcases and driving a vehicle we'd never seen before, a black Mercedes registered to something called Pacific Consulting Group. We've been searching for him for 7 hours. My stomach dropped. The hearing is in 2 hours. Sarah, there's something else. We intercepted communications between Derek and his contacts in the Cayman Islands at 4:30 this morning. He's initiated what appears to be a complete liquidation of all offshore accounts. We're talking about moving approximately $18 million to locations we can't track. I stumbled to my kitchen, my hands shaking as I tried to make coffee. Through my window, Sacramento was waking up to a normal Tuesday morning while my world imploded in real time. Can you stop the transfers? We're trying, but international banking laws make it complicated. Derek's had months to set up multiple contingency plans. Agent Torres paused, and I could hear other voices in the background. Sarah, we think Derek's been planning this specific scenario for weeks. The emergency hearing, Patricia's defection, even your arrangement with Catherine Walsh, he may have orchestrated all of it to create the perfect cover for his disappearance. At 7:15 a.m., Catherine called, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Sarah, Derek just sent me an email that makes no sense. He's claiming he had to leave town due to a family emergency but insists the hearing should proceed as scheduled. He's asking me to present his financial disclosure to the court without him present. I gripped the phone tighter. Catherine, you can't go to that hearing. What are you talking about? I'm his attorney. If Derek wants to proceed. Derek is gone. The FBI has been investigating him for money laundering, and he disappeared sometime last night with millions of dollars in stolen assets. Silence stretched between us for nearly 30 seconds. Sarah, Catherine finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, are you telling me that I've been representing a federal fugitive? I'm telling you that the man you've been advocating for just fled the country with enough evidence to destroy both our careers if anyone finds out about our arrangement. At 8:23 a.m., I was sitting in Judge Morrison's courtroom watching Catherine Walsh do something I'd never seen before, request an emergency withdrawal from representation due to circumstances that have recently come to light regarding client conduct. Judge Morrison looked as confused as I felt. Ms. Walsh, you filed this case yesterday claiming your client was eager to resolve all outstanding issues. Now you're withdrawing on the morning of the hearing? Your Honor, I discovered information that makes it impossible for me to continue representation in good conscience. I'm requesting that this matter be continued pending the location of Mr. Mitchell, who appears to be unavailable. At exactly 8:47 a.m., Agent Torres walked into the courtroom with 3 other federal agents, presenting Judge Morrison with a warrant for Derek Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The judge's face went through a series of expressions I'll never forget: confusion, realization, and then something approaching outrage. Ms. Walsh, did you know about this federal investigation when you filed yesterday's motion? Catherine's face had gone completely white. Your Honor, I'm as surprised as anyone by these developments. As the FBI agents explained Derek's crimes to Judge Morrison, I realized the beautiful irony of what had just happened. Derek's elaborate scheme to manipulate the court system had collapsed under the weight of his own paranoia. By fleeing before the hearing, he'd transformed himself from a clever manipulator into an obvious criminal. But as Agent Torres approached me in the courthouse hallway, her expression told me our problems were just beginning. Sarah, we found Derek's Mercedes abandoned at Sacramento International Airport. His passport is missing, and there's evidence he boarded a private jet to Mexico at 3:17 this morning. Derek hadn't just escaped. He'd vanished into thin air, taking $18 million and all hope of justice with him. 6 months later, I was sitting in my office reviewing a client file when Agent Torres called with news that made me drop my coffee mug. Sarah, we got him. My heart stopped. Derek? Mexican authorities arrested him 3 hours ago in Puerto Vallarta. Turns out your ex-husband made the same mistake most fugitives make: he got comfortable. I sank into my chair, hardly believing what I was hearing. What happened? Derek couldn't resist the urge to keep making money. He set up shop in Mexico, offering the same money laundering services to American expats trying to hide assets from the IRS. Problem is, one of his new clients was actually an undercover agent from our International Crimes Division. The irony was perfect. Derek's greed had been his downfall after all. There's more, Agent Torres continued. We've recovered approximately $14.7 million from various accounts Derek thought were untouchable. Turns out Mexican banking laws aren't as fugitive-friendly as he believed. $14.7 million. My hands were shaking as I wrote down the number. What happens now? Now Derek gets extradited back to Sacramento to face federal charges. And Sarah? The court has ordered full restitution to defrauded parties. You're about to become a very wealthy woman. The federal case moved quickly once Derek was back in custody. His team of expensive lawyers, different ones this time, since Catherine had been cleared of any wrongdoing, tried to argue that he'd been a victim of circumstance, pressured by sophisticated criminal associates into laundering money he didn't understand. Patricia Hendricks's testimony destroyed that defense in 47 minutes. On a Thursday morning in October, I sat in federal court watching Derek Mitchell, wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking 10 years older than when I'd married him, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. But the real victory came 3 weeks later, when I received a cashier's check from the U.S. Attorney's Office for $4.3 million in restitution, my share of the marital assets Derek had hidden, plus penalties and interest. $4.3 million. The cost of my elaborate revenge scheme had been roughly $127,000 when all was said and done. My return on investment was approximately 3,400%. As I deposited that check, I thought about Derek's smug email from nearly a year earlier. Asterisk, hope you're not planning to take the shirt off my back over this. I literally have nothing left to give you. Asterisk. He'd been right about one thing. He really did have nothing left to give me. I'd taken everything else. That evening, I called Jennifer to finally tell her the whole story. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, remind me never to divorce you. Don't worry, I said, looking out at downtown Sacramento's glittering lights. I'm thinking of staying single for a while. Turns out I'm pretty good at taking care of myself. The next morning, I woke up in my new house, a beautiful place in East Sacramento with a view of the river and enough space for the law library I'd always wanted. On my kitchen counter was a newspaper article about Derek's sentencing, with a quote from the U.S. attorney calling it one of the most sophisticated financial fraud schemes we've prosecuted in recent years. I smiled, thinking about the title Derek would never see: ex-husband's own lawyer helps ex-wife recover millions in hidden assets. Sometimes the best revenge is a patient woman with a law degree and absolutely nothing left to lose. Except, as it turned out, I'd had everything to gain. Derek had taught me never to underestimate anyone again. I taught him the same lesson. Worth every penny.